Wow. Well, I mean, wasn't that something? That was just an incredible video. And I'd like to know who's the genius who scheduled me to follow something as extraordinary as that. And of course, it was me, because the Public Relations Department, of which I'm the head, I'm the Director of Communications at the Heartland Institute, has had a big hand, obviously, in putting this conference together, along with many other staff, everybody else at the Heartland Institute. And I want to thank them for their very, very hard work. So far, we have another half day to go, but I want to publicly thank everybody at the Heartland Institute for their very hard work in putting together, yet again, another fantastic conference. And what a day this has been. I mean, we've seen astronauts up here on the stage. We've seen a Lord, the embodiment of ribald nobility in Chris Monckton. We've seen shirtless protesters and a man who calls himself Vermin Supreme with wearing a rubber boot on his head. And I have the pictures on my iPhone if anyone would like to see it. We've seen outstanding presentations of science that does so much to battle the public ignorance of what is really happening to the Earth's climate. And that is just so valuable to people, and I'm grateful that the Heartland Institute has all of these videos online. There is no excuse for being ignorant about what's really happening in the real science that's happening in climate, and I'm so proud that the Heartland Institute has been able to present this now 7 times. The evidence is outstanding, it is indisputable, and it is there permanently. And of course, we've just seen a video that should have you all, after a long day, really energized to hear our next speaker, who is Brian Sussman. For 20 years, Brian was an award-winning television meteorologist in San Francisco. His accolades include nearly 24 state and regional awards for Best Weathercast from the Associated Press and Radio TV News Directors Association. He's won several Emmys and an award for merit from the National Education Association for his science reporting. He has also served on the American Meteorological Society's Board of Education. During the 1990s, Brian was the fill-in weatherman on the nationally broadcast CBS Morning Show. Sussman shocked the media when he voluntarily left the TV airwaves in 2001, which not too many people do voluntarily for sure, with the goal of transitioning into a successful talk radio career. He was soon asked to be the host on the legendary talk station KSFO in San Francisco, and in 2010, Brian was promoted to headline the station's morning show, which is now the top-rated morning program in San Francisco. And if a man who makes as much sense as Brian can be the #1 rated show in San Francisco, there is hope for the world after all. Brian is also a regular substitute host on one of my favorite programs, the nationally syndicated Mark Levin Show. He is a best-selling author, the author of Climategate, a veteran meteorologist exposes the global warming scam, which was released on Sean Hannity's television program on Earth Day 2010. Nice coup. His second book, which he had signed tonight in the foyer, is Eco-Tyranny, How the Left's Green Agenda Will Dismantle America, and that hit stores last month. And he's been blogging about the Heartland Institute conference, for which we're very grateful, blogging about it on his website, debatemealgore.com. I don't think you have to worry, Brian, about changing that URL. I have a feeling it's going to be permanent. And here to present his speech tonight, titled Global Whining, it is my great pleasure to introduce Brian Sussman.
Excellent. Well, I have to tell you, this has been quite a day. I don't know how I'm supposed to follow you, Lord, but we will try. I will also tell you that that video that you saw really is the video version of my book, Eco-Tyranny. There's no question about it, because I touch on all of this as I will explain. First of all, it's a delight to be here in front of all of you. Some of you are my heroes. Some of you, I have read your stuff. You have become footnotes in my books and my blogs. Others of you have just stolen material from outright without attribution, so I hope you forgive me for that. But we've got some brilliant people in this audience, and I love each and every one of you so much. Dr. Singer, Where is the Dr. Singer? Dr. Singer, yes, you were the man, sir. You're a great hero. You're a great American. I will give you my Dr. Singer story. Dr. Singer was on my radio show in San Francisco, and after the broadcast, he said, listen, Brian, I need a cab. I have some errands I need to run in San Francisco. I said, no problem. I will be your driver. I would love to drive you around for the day in San Francisco. It's not a problem. So I said, tell you what, I'm going to go down to the garage. I'll get my vehicle. Meet me on the curb. So he didn't know that my vehicle is the most obnoxious vehicle in San Francisco. It's a gigantic 4x4 Dodge 1500 lifted. I pull up next to him. He doesn't really know what's going on. I open up the door. I said, Doctor, come on in. He's really having a tough time getting in. He kind of needs a step ladder to jump into this thing. Gets in the vehicle and turns to me and says, Brian, this is the largest vehicle I've ever been in. To which I said, yes, and let me tell you something, doctor. The fruits and nuts in this city hate this vehicle, but the trees love it. The CO2, here comes Sussman. We love it. You know what I wish I could have done? I'm serious, because there are just so many brilliant people here. We all have a know-it-all that's kind of obnoxious in our life. You know, just somebody who kind of knows it all and likes to brag about their doings. I've got this one guy. It would have been great to bring him. He's the guy that just brags about his exploits. And I would love for him to come here, and I would purposefully sit him down at a very specific table with several people, maybe a couple people, make it 2 people. And I would love to see my friend say, yeah, the wife and I, we're going to do a month in Paris, and after that I'm going to be going to I'm going to be going to the Dome and Half Dome in Yosemite. I'm going to climb that. After that, I think I'm going to take the kids down to the Colorado River. We're going to do a couple weeks rafting on the Colorado. You guys like traveling? I love traveling. Tell me about your traveling. And Cunningham turns to Schmidt. And Schmidt says, well, a few years ago we flew to the moon. I would love to see that. How do you top that? No one could top you. No one would ever want to be in a cocktail party with these guys and brag about your exploits. Well, you know, once upon a time I flew to the moon. Yeah, I walked on the moon. It was pretty cool. By the way, Joseph Bass, you are a genius. Okay, I know you've been kind of in the crosshairs of a lot of things recently. You're a genius. I applaud you, sir. Yes. You could have paid a Madison Avenue advertising firm $250,000 and they could not have come up with a better bit than that billboard. It never would have happened. That was flippin' awesome. And I will tell you something. You know, I talk about this in my book, Eco-Tyranny. The truth of the matter is, when you look at the big picture, the Unabomber, who's now in a nice little cell in Supermax, the most secure place in the world, this guy was a radical environmentalist. I've read his manifesto. He was a radical environmentalist. And this is a guy, when they found him in his little hovel in Montana, he had, amongst other things, a well-worn copy, dog-eared, underlined, highlighted, a well-worn copy of Al Gore's Earth in the Balance. So I think maybe somebody like Al Gore might have provided him with a little bit of inspiration. See, this is the point. You know, the rhetoric from the left, from these radical environmentalists, is scary. You could just get somebody who's a little bit off their rocker listening to this stuff, and God knows what they could do. In fact, the Unabomber killed people. The Unabomber tried to take down a plane. But more recently, there was a guy named James Lee. James Lee was the guy who decided, we have to do something about global warming. I'm taking hostages at the Discovery Channel, and I'm going to make sure they give 24/7 coverage to global warming. Now, this poor guy was taken out by the cops. But I will tell you, one of the things we learned about this man is that I believe the term was enlightened. He had been enlightened by Al Gore's movie, An Inconvenient Truth. Okay, this kind of stuff can inspire people to do something crazy. You get these young people who have grown up believing that there's unstoppable global warming their whole lives. And you hear them, you perhaps, for example, have Al Gore talk to them about the scenario he's painted of a meteor hitting the Earth. That's what global warming is going to be like. A meteor hitting the Earth, the kind of meteor that killed all the dinosaurs. He's made that analogy. That's like a nuclear bomb the size of which my mind can't even, I can't get my brain around that one. That's how Al Gore scares people. So, okay, that's frightening rhetoric. What if somebody decided who was just a little off center, okay, I got to take matters in my own hands. I got to go do something, if you know what I mean. That's frightening. You get Jim Hansen calling trains that carry coal death trains. Okay, so somebody's a little off center. They hear that. All right, I'm strapping myself to the tracks. I mean, this is crazy talk. Then you get that professor at the University of Oregon, Carrie Norgard, who says people like me and perhaps some of you need to be treated. We need to be treated. How long is it going to be before we're the victims of hate crimes? Oh, there's a global warming denier. There's a global skeptic. Get them. I mean, folks, we're moving into a brave new world here. And I will tell you on Vladimir Lenin's birthday, just a few weeks ago, I was in Santa Cruz, California, doing some man-on-the-street interviews with a TV crew, and I asked this question: what is the number one threat facing humanity today? This mother comes up to me, and she's so proud of her daughter. She says, you need to ask that question to my daughter. I said, I'm not here to talk to kids. No, you need to talk to my daughter. She's very environmentally aware. So I talked to the daughter, 12-year-old, beautiful little kid. I mean, if she were my daughter, she's just beautiful, beautiful child. She starts opening up her mouth. It's like I get punched in the gut. She says the number one threat facing humanity today, humans. I ask her why. She says, well, the pollution. The birds are flying through the pollution and the birds die, and then the animals eat the birds, and then the animals get into the food chain, and we're eating all of this poison. And I said, where did you learn this? And she said, in my school. And she named the school. And I said, well, how does it make you feel? She said, quote, sometimes I think we shouldn't even exist. Now, come on, this is a 12-year-old kid. When I was 12 and you were 12, we dreamed. You dreamed of being a doctor, playing in the NFL, doing this, that, or the other. She doesn't even know if she should exist. This is the green agenda that's wormed its way into every facet of our society. And this is what we're battling, friends. This is what we're battling. So I just have to tell you, regarding the billboard. See, you were following, Joseph, you were following the ancient art of war according to Sun Tzu. If your enemy has a choleric temperament, irritate him. And that's exactly what you have done, my friend. Thank you very much. By the way, I am originally from California, born there, live there now, but there were 5 years when I lived here in Chicagoland. I moved here in the 70s, a period of global cooling. I remember it because I lived through it. I was in high school, global cooling. And I'm from California. I'd never seen 0 degrees in my life. It hit 0. I'm freezing. My California cuckoo's off, okay? I'm looking around the rest of my friends, 0. They're hardy. They're from Chicago. It doesn't bother them at all. These people can really handle the weather. Although there's a temperature that I think they would not be able to handle too well. If it ever gets 173 degrees below 0, that's the temperature which alcohol freezes. And it'll be the first time the bars on Rush Street have ever closed. Then we could be in a problem. There's another temperature that I think they will enjoy. I'm positive people from Chicago will enjoy it. If it gets to 460 degrees below 0, that's the temperature at which all atomic motion stops. That's basically hell freezing over. 460 degrees below 0, and that's when the World Series is won by the Cubs. That's it. That's it. 460, baby. By the way, you know somebody's really from Chicago when they know someone who is dead and who has voted. That's the one thing about this place, it's for sure. And also, I love this about Chicagoans. I had a discussion at the bar with a guy about football because I love football, professional football, and he was talking about the Super Bowl. Now, when somebody from Chicago talks about the Super Bowl, they're talking about one game that was played in 1986. Okay? That's it. That's the Super Bowl for them. I wrote Climategate. Well, I got one more for you. This is a great joke. No, this is a really good joke. Because this is Crook County, right? This is not Cook County. This is Crook County. And now Rahm Emanuel's in charge of Crook County, okay? But it's the whole state. Joseph, it's the whole state that's bad. I mean, you look at the last 7 elected governors in the state. The last 7 elected governors. There was a poll recently done. The question was, do you know anything about sex in the shower? 4 of those governors said, yes, we do. 3 said, no, we haven't been to prison yet. So that's this, right? Come on. I wrote Climategate because I was really concerned about the global warming scam. And I wanted to write, and there's some guys here who have written some wonderful books. I mean, Patrick Buckles, you're the man. You are the man. You've written more and the best, and they're just awesome. You were an inspiration to me, seriously. So I wanted to try my shot at writing a book because I really like writing, and I was really concerned about cap and trade. I thought, what can one guy do? Because this nation was built on what can one person do? That's what it's all about. Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. What can one person do? So I thought, okay, I'll write a book. I'll write a book. And I'll write a book on, well, something that will get people's attention. Maybe we can stop cap and trade. Because I knew what that would do to dismantle America. So we put together the book Climategate, and it became perfect timing in the marketplace and became a bestseller. And by the way, it was just one of the many voices that helped stop cap and trade. And I thank you. And I do know this for sure, that there were members of Congress who read that book because I would hear from them just saying, thanks for a nice one-stop shopping place where I could get a lot of information on this particular issue. But as I was writing that book, I thought there's a bigger scam here. It's the environmental movement. This whole thing is built on faulty science, faulty premise. It's just bad stuff. So that's when I decided I would write another book on this particular topic. I have to back up a little bit. I had a successful career in television, as you heard, but one of the reasons why I left TV had to do with a conversation I had with Dan Rather. Dan, for those of you who are under 40, you don't know who Dan Rather is. He's been out of TV for a long time, but back in the day, he was like the man for CBS News. So Dan Rather would come to San Francisco and broadcast a lot, and I got to know him fairly well. And he told me one time, he said, Brian, this is mid-90s El Nino. El Nino is a big deal. And he said, Brian, El Nino is a big story. We'd like to have you as our West Coast El Nino correspondent. And I'm thinking, wow, CBS Evening News. This will raise my stature in the TV community. Good for the family bottom line. This is awesome. And then he said, and with global warming, we'd like to have you report on the connection between El Nino and global warming. And this is just the way I am. Open mouth, insert Florsheim. I'll just say whatever I'm thinking. And I said, I'm sorry, sir, but I don't think there's any credible meteorologist on the planet who would link El Nino to global warming. And at that moment, his whole countenance changed. Darts came out of his eyes. He cut my legs out from under me, and that was the end of any conversations about me being his West Coast correspondent for El Nino, because I wouldn't talk about global warming. And I'll back up a little further. So that story happens. Then there's another thing. Dr. Singer has this thing called the Leipzig Agreement. Leipzig, how do we pronounce that? Leipzig? And he contacts me and says, Brian, I understand you're a meteorologist. I'd like to have you sign this document. Why don't you look it over? And so I didn't know Dr. Singer from Adam at that point in time. Didn't know what this Leipzig was all about. I get it. I thought, well, I understand this. I'm kind of a skeptic on global warming. And I don't think policy should be made on this the skepticism that I share and the theory of anthropogenic global warming being kind of weak. Yeah, I'll sign it. So now I'm a signatory to this. And suddenly I'm getting calls from other journalists around the country who are wanting to interview me for their reports. And basically all they were doing was slamming me, ripping me, cursing me out over the phone. How could you? You're a meteorologist. You signed this. And I think, whoa, hold on here. Wait a second. There's something bigger at play. So, Dr. Singer, I would like to thank you very much for the fact that I went from a really big salary to now the much smaller, compact salary in radio. But I did it because I just couldn't stand this anymore. And then I had to write the book, and then I've got to write another book. But let me just share with you a few things from eco-tyranny. Again, this entire environmental movement is pretty suspect. Let's go to the first environmental crisis. I mean, I wanted to know, okay, what was the first perceived global environmental crisis? So I found a guy in the mid-1800s. His name was Justus von Liebig. Justus von Liebig was a biologist. And Liebig saw what was happening in England with farming. They were using guano, bird poop, to put on the crops, and now their yields had increased greatly. And Liebig was an anti-capitalist, and he was kind of like Marx and Engels. He was what they called themselves materialists. In other words, these are people who believe certain folks are randomly spit out of their mother's womb with a better brain than others, and those people with a slightly better brain have some sort of metaphysical reason to be in charge of those with the lesser brain. Because left to themselves, those with the lesser brain will kill one another and destroy the planet. So that's what Marx believed. That's what Engels believed. They talked about this in their laws of matter. And this is what Liebig believed as well. So Liebig saw the guano trade. He's thinking, okay, wait a second. He's doing these extrapolations which never seem to work. His extrapolation was, okay, more crops. That means people are going to eat more. That means they'll probably have healthier lives. That means they'll have more children. They'll probably have more livestock as well because there'll be more crops to feed the livestock. That means they're going to have more horses because they'll need transportation. That means they'll need bigger houses. And to have the bigger houses, they're going to have to cut down a lot of trees. This guano trade is going to kill planet Earth. That's what he wrote. And he said, this is the guano, it's the livestock poop, and it's the horse poop, and it's the human poop. He saw all of this as a big poop thing. So he writes about this. And at the core of this, he just didn't like human beings. He didn't like capitalism. He didn't like progress. So what happened? There are two guys in Germany, very well-known leftist thinkers, and two incredible writers who see what von Liebig's doing, and they say, wait a second, I think he's really onto something here. How about this? Capitalism produces pollution. In fact, look at all these new combustion engines. Look what they're putting into the sky. It's this black smoke. Someday, there will be so many of these people with so many of these contraptions that they'll put all the smoke into the sky, it'll block out the sun, and it will create an ice age. Let me read this to you. This is fascinating. But inexorably, the time will come when the declining warmth of the sun will no longer suffice to melt the ice thrusting itself forward from the poles. When the human race, crowding more and more about the equator, will finally no longer find even there enough heat for life. When gradually even the last trace of organic life will vanish, and the earth, an extinct, frozen globe like the moon, will circle in deepest darkness and in an ever narrower orbit about the equally extinct sun, and at last fall into it. Now that's some incredibly scary writing. This is 1883, Dialectics of Nature, Frederick Engels, writing partner of Karl Marx. The first climate catastrophe put together by Marx and Engels, folks. 1883, global cooling, and they haven't left it since. It was global cooling, then it was global warming, then it was global cooling, then warming, and now this catch-all phrase, climate change. And it's all based on faulty science. It was in 1883, and it is today. Nothing's changed, my friends. Nothing has changed whatsoever. What's really interesting, when you look at the entire environmental movement, as I have, because I love reading what these people had to say. I think it's just, we get wonderful lessons from this. So you have Marx's buddy, von Liebig, comes up with the first environmental crisis. And then you get Marx's disciple, a guy named Sir Ray Lancaster. Sir Ray Lancaster loves everything Marx has to say, hates capitalism, hates free markets, hates people as much as Marx did. So you have Ray Lancaster actually describing people as the insurgent sons of nature. the insurgent sons of nature. Lancaster has a disciple named Tainsley. Tainsley likes what Lancaster has to say because he was his teacher, loves what Marx had to say, and he says, I've got to come up with a better word for this. We've got to be able to better use the environment, which they just called nature at the time, to hammer capitalism and hammer free markets. So Tainsley invents the word ecology because he said ecology, this new word, must be applied to describe the destructive nature of the human activities in the natural world. And then you go to another one, a guy named Charles Elton, who was Tainsley's disciple as well. And Charles Elton described something else. Charles Elton described the fact that humans, because you see all these crazy leftist thinkers don't like humans a whole lot. Humans are causing an astonishing reign of death upon the Earth's surface. So this link of all these very, very left-wing thinkers and how they want to use the environment as a tool, environmental crises, both real and imagined, to hammer capitalism, free markets, and even put people at a lower level than they'd ever been placed before in the order. So now you have a woman that our Department of Interior to this day calls the mother of the environmental movement. She wrote a book called Silent Spring. And I thought, okay, Rachel Carson, Silent Spring, mother of the environmental movement, let's start to look at the people she quotes in her book. Let's just do a little study to see who she's quoting. And so I noticed that she talks about the astonishing reign of death coming to the Earth's surface. She stole that line right from Elton, who was the disciple of Tainsley, who was the disciple of Lancaster, who was the disciple of Marx. She also quotes some other noted communist thinkers, like, for example, Richard Muller. Richard Muller, a Nobel Prize-winning physicist, and she quotes him a lot in her book. But it's interesting, the backstory on Richard Muller, he hated the United States so much that he moved to Nazi Germany. And when that type of socialism really wasn't what he liked, he decided to move to the Soviet Union. And then after the war, he came back to the United States and he taught at the University of Texas, and he ran the Democrat Students Association, which was a communist funk group. I mean, these characters keep, as I told somebody from one of these news outlets covering this, the history of this movement, whether you like it or not, leftist thinkers, socialists and communists, you can go to the major environmental organizations today and have conversations with their leaders or start sifting through their website to look at what they believe, and you will find that they have more in common with Karl Marx than with James Madison. That's the absolute truth. There's no running, there's no hiding. That's just the way it plays out. Karl Marx hated private property. In fact, when you look at the Communist Manifesto, number one plank, abolition of private property. What was this country built on? The right to own property. Life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. If you look through readings of people like Locke, the pursuit of happiness is the ownership of property. Karl Marx looked at what was happening here. He thought it was just a bastardization of all political experiments. But life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, the ability to own property. And when you look at the environmental movement today, what's their number one goal? They're going after property rights. With environmental species, with all of these regulations. I live in California. I'm seeing it firsthand. We're about to begin cap and trade in November. Our plan in California makes anything dreamed up in the mind of Jackson at the EPA look small. We're going full bore. We've got guys with guns going into cabinet manufacturers. They're with the Cal EPA. They've got guns on their hips. They come into your shop unannounced, and they want to see all your paints and varnishes. Are you in compliance? If you're not, you're going to get written up right now, and if you resist, you're going to jail. This is in California, folks. These are property rights. These are businesses that are undergoing this kind of stuff. So I wanted to know, what was the original thought with our founders regarding property rights? I really wanted to know, because I look around now at the 700 million acres that the federal government manages in the United States, 700 million acres. And you know, when the federal government manages it, it takes, generally speaking, those resources off limits. So, and these are our resources. These are mine, these are yours. We're American people. This is our land. And they're taking our resources from us. If I wanted America to fail, that's why I say the video mimics so much of what I write about. But here's the idea. The founders, before the Articles of Confederation, they put together some documents and they were very, very clear on this. Their point was the federal government will not hold any land except which is necessary to a limited central government. We won't hold any land. Any land we get, we'll give to the states or give to individuals. My grandparents were benefactors of that in northern Minnesota. They had a sustenance farm that they were able to purchase and they lived off of for a couple generations. 700 million acres. And the founders knew this. Whoever owns the land owns the resources. And a tyrannical government owning the land could withhold those resources from the people. And therein lies the problem. And you have an administration currently working so feverishly behind the scenes to gobble up more land. In the back of my book in 2010, I found a document, thanks to a friend of mine who works at the Heritage Foundation. She told me about 3 pages of a document she had seen. And I said, I got to know more about this document. So I was one of the first people to find it. We scanned it, put it in the back of the book. It's a draft document by Obama's Department of Interior, complete with some mastermind's handwriting on it, to take over 140 million acres of private land. Private land. And what are they going to do with that land? Well, it's clear from reading this 21-page document. They want to withhold resources, and they want to make it such that people will not even be able to walk in this acreage owned by the federal government. Okay, this is tyranny. This is not liberty. This is not what our founders intended. The big question is, what's going to happen to these United States of America? In 2050, well, Al Gore and crew says by 2050 we need to cut emissions by 90% or whatever the cockamamie number is. By 2050, well, let's go 20 years from now. 20 years from now, we're going to have 50 million more people in America, census data. 40 years from now, 100 million more people, census data. That's a lot of bodies. We need more energy. We need more water. 36 states facing critical water shortages right now. We need more available land. So my point is, unless we want America to fail, we have to start preparing right now. There's no time to waste here. Because we have a situation where we're not going to have the resources necessary for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness as our founders intended. And who's standing in the way of all this? The environmentalists. Thank you. Yes, it's true. We've got, in California, we have a saying, whiskey's for drinking, water's for fighting over. We don't have enough water. Environmentalists, in concert with the Department of Interior, are tearing down dams. We're the #1 ag state in the nation. Farms that have been producing crops for us for generations are going fallow. They're not working anymore. And this is the plan. Return everything back to nature. I don't know where we're going to get this food from. We need water. Who stands in the way of every dam that we want to construct, every reservoir we want to expand, or even desalination? It's the environmentalists. You look at our oil and gas situation right now. Isn't it amazing? The media is talking about fracking. They're talking about fracking. And they're talking about fracking as if it's new technology. Fracking's been around for decades. We probably fracked 1 million times. And that's a lot of fracking. But the point is, we've been doing this forever, and they're considering it to be evil. We have 3.3 million people directly attached to oil and natural gas exploration and production in this country. 3.3 million directly attached, direct employees. And then there are millions of others who support those. Could you imagine if we just doubled our output of natural gas and oil? Millions of jobs. We would basically have no unemployment problems in this country. And if we did that, the Saudis would soil their tunics. They wouldn't know what to do because we've got so much of it. And then nuclear power. I live around these kooks who are trying to close our nuclear power plants in California, and it's ridiculous. And the straw man that they hold out there every time is nuclear waste. And I'm thinking, wait a second. Okay, I've done the calculations on this. If you took all of the nuclear waste from all 104 nuclear power plants in operation since the 1960s, all that nuclear waste could be housed in an average high school-sized gymnasium. Okay, that's it. And if we reprocessed our fuel like every other country does, no thanks, by the way, to Gerald Ford on that. If we reprocessed our nuclear fuel, it would be probably the size of a high school library. That's where we could keep all of this stuff. So nuclear waste is just a straw man, but we need nuclear power. We need 100 new nuclear power plants in the next 20 years just to maintain the percentage of nuclear power we have in our nation's energy portfolio. We need to do this today. But these are all very, very sensitive issues to the Greens. They don't want to hear about this because they have incredibly thin skin and they don't want to debate these issues, and basically they're controlling our media. I'll give you a great example of how thin the skin is. Alec Baldwin. Yes, he may be a great actor and all, but he's not a great actor. Joseph says. He called the gentleman who endorsed my book an oil whore. That would be Senator Jim Inhofe. And as soon as I heard about that, I thought, oh, wait a second. Now, Senator Jim Inhofe is a really nice guy, and he's a really smart guy, and he's been doing a yeoman's job going up against my Senator Barbara Boxer all these years. God bless the man. And now he calls the guy who's just endorsed my book an oil whore. I've got to do something. And then Robert F. Kennedy Jr. piles on. He calls Inhofe Big Oil's top call girl. So I follow a lot of people on Twitter, and one of the people I follow is actually Alec Baldwin. I like to hear some of the crazy things this guy has to say. And I had a bet with a friend of mine. He said, go after Baldwin. I'll bet he'll drop you as a follower. And I'm thinking, do you really think he reads all million of the tweets he's getting every day? My friend said, his ego's so huge, you just watch. He will drop you as a follower. So these are my tweets to Alec Baldwin. If Jim Inhofe is an oil whore, then Alec Baldwin is an eco slut. Didn't get any attention. So I'll ramp it up again. If Jim Inhofe is an oil whore, then Alec Baldwin is an environmental hooker. Still nothing. If Jim Inhofe is an oil whore, then Alec Baldwin is a green strumpet. He probably didn't know what that word means. But maybe I had his attention by this time. Alec Baldwin is an actor who could only debate his eco views with the aid of a script. Now I'm noticing on the Twitter feeds, this is picking up, and people are watching this. So I thought, oh, this is kind of fun. So my next one, let's debate the green issues, Alec Baldwin. I'll even let you bring along your hypocrite friend, Robert Kennedy Jr., to the debate. Okay. Now, I probably shouldn't be surprised because suddenly I noticed that I had been blocked as a follower of Alec Baldwin. I'm thinking, he was reading all this stuff. He doesn't have a life. He's so self-absorbed, he's reading tweets from me on the left coast. Unbelievable. And then Baldwin responds to me with this. Brian Sussman, I think Bobby Kennedy would tie you up in a ball, dribble you on the ground, and shoot you into an oil well. Okay, it's kind of funny. But the power of the pen. Alec Baldwin, not before I would shred Robert Kennedy Jr.'s rhetoric like a raptor flying through the blades of a wind turbine. And now Twitter's going haywire. And people are saying, you should debate him, Alec. And others are kind of PO'd because he blocked me as a follower. That's like, you don't do that. Come on, you don't do that. So he's getting hammered by so many people for dropping me. He says, I'm keeping the right-wingers who challenge me, entertain me, and inform me, but others get blocked because they bore me like Brian Sussman. I wear that as a badge of honor, ladies and gentlemen. I will tell you, because this is such an important issue. You know, this country's been immensely good to me and my family. And I know you would say the same thing. I get really emotional when I think about it. But this is a great country, and we need to keep it. We need to preserve it. We need to get back on the right track, lest we lose it. Life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness are on the line. And I'm inspired by our founders. I'm inspired by the stories of our founders, and I include some in the back of Eco-Tyranny because I want to just pump people up and get people ready for the battle. You know, I look at some of you, you're in the trenches. You're in the trenches. You're doing something. You do what you can. I appreciate that. When I met Dr. Gray, you know, I've known of Dr. Gray, I've had him on my radio show, but never got to meet him. And Dr. Gray's passionate about this. He's not giving up. He doesn't care. He's not giving up. I look at a guy like Anthony Watts. I remember Anthony when he was the meteorologist at our TV station in Chico, California. And then he started this little blog where he's talking about surface stations. And then it blows up. I mean, Anthony's a patriot. He's out there doing what he can do. And you know, it just started with a guy with a little vision, and it took off. I mean, anybody can do that. That's what you people are doing. That's what you people need to do. I want to encourage you just to go for it. So much is on the line. But I love the story of our founders. You know, I always tell these stories, and we'll take some questions in just a moment. You had 51 signers of the Declaration. There were 51 men who signed and 50 women who were backing them all the way. I say 50 women because Ben Franklin's wife had died many years earlier. So if you read the stories, the 50 women all looked their husbands in the eye at some point in time and said, "Sign it. Sign it. Sign it." And these were fiery ladies. There's no question about it. And they all knew, you know, they pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honors. They knew a lot was on the line. Because for some of them, they knew with that signature, the British Crown would be going after their families immediately. Lord Monckton, we're cool here, right? Everything's all right? Okay, we're good? We're good? I consider you a great American. Okay, I'm just telling you that right now. I consider you. So, nothing personal here. We're good, right? Okay. You are Lord Monckton. It's all good.
Monckton for president.
Right on. I'll take him for president. So, if you ever look at the Declaration of Independence, you'll notice a name, Francis Lewis. Just one of the 51. Let me tell you a little bit about Francis Lewis. Francis was a businessman. He came from England when he was about 21, and he started doing business with the British Army. He was selling them some supplies during the French and Indian War. He was taken captive by the French, put in a box, and shipped to France where he was in prison. He was treated miserably. And this guy, he was just a businessman. He wasn't in the military. There was a prisoner exchange that occurred. He was brought back to the colonies, and the British Crown said, "Francis Lewis, because you have been so faithful to the Crown and because you endured so much, we're going to give you 5,000 acres on Long Island." So he built a wonderful estate on Long Island, and you would think he'd be loyal to the Crown forever, but he saw the tyranny, the taxation, the control, the regulations, and he says, "I can't take this anymore." And he and his wife said, "We need to be a part of this revolution. We need to be a part of this movement." So he ends up becoming a signer of the Declaration of Independence. No sooner had he signed that document, the Brits said, "Take out Lewis's house now." They sent the Navy up the coast, posted warships outside of his house on the shores of Long Island, and started firing cannonballs into his house. His wife gets on a balcony and starts cursing the Brits. One of their servants says, "Run, mistress, run." And she said, "Their aim is so bad, another cannonball will never hit this close again." This is after one just zoomed by her shoulder. There's an ambush from behind with ground troops. They take her prisoner. Francis Lewis was never able to come home. His house had been destroyed, livestock killed, horses gone, wife gone. They take her to a jail Now again, this is during the Little Ice Age, as you'll remember. It's very cold back then. No warm clothes, no bed, no change of clothes, barely any food. She's there for a long time. Finally, George Washington arranges a prisoner swap. The only way she survived is because one of her servants found out where she was, reported back to Francis Lewis. There were arrangements made to bring her, sneak her in food and give her changes of underwear. That's about all they could do. Francis Lewis, his life was in peril. He could not see her. Finally, after the prisoner swap, they go back to Long Island on their property. Property's ransacked. She doesn't live much more than a few months after that because she was in such poor health, having been mistreated by her captors. She dies. Francis Lewis goes into a depression, withdraws from public life, and that was it. His fortune was gone. His wife's life was gone. But he gave it all. Now, see, I'm encouraged by that because I want to give it all. And I want you guys to give it all. We've got to give it all for the sake of this country. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. God bless America. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Let me say a word real quick before we start. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
That was fantastic, Brian. You know, listening to your presentation, I started to realize why you had so many jokes in the beginning of it. It's because as you're going through, I mean, it's an inspiring message, but some of it is so grim. You know, they're coming to indoctrinate our children. They're coming for our property, for our liberty. Yay!
Yeah. And let me tell you about Alec Baldwin. Right. You got to have the comic relief, man. You got to do that.
Well, we are ready for Q&A, so please raise your hand and a microphone will find its way to you.
We have 6 months or less than 6 months to save America. Can we do it?
I am encouraged by gatherings like this. I'm encouraged by, you know, because my radio show is a political show, but we do have a lot of fun because it is San Francisco, and I need to, you know, just keep spirits up because if you're a conservative, it can get pretty nasty out there. So we try to entertain people. But I know that in the liberal San Francisco Bay Area, you've got these Tea Party type groups that are meeting every week all over the Bay Area. And my guess is this is happening all over the country. And so people are fired up. They're ready to hit the ground with their boots running once the candidate is officially discovered or anointed or whatever we call it, crowned, whatever it is. But Romney's likely the guy. So people are ready. But more importantly, what I see in the trenches is there are a lot of congressional candidates who barely lost in the last election, who did not give up. And now they've got a couple of years of getting their act together, getting their message down, getting their funding, getting their name recognition in their districts. I think you're going to see a huge influx of real people with their brains screwed on properly, right thinkers, constitutionally minded, getting into the House, and I believe even the Senate. So that's very encouraging to me. I know we had one of our speakers did those graphs on left, right, center, and where global warming is and all of that. My guess is when you look at how many people would consider themselves to be conservatives who are actually fearful of anthropogenic global warming, my guess is there will be some politicians who just decide to back off the issue. Well, look at the polling. See, what we really need at the end of the day, we need somebody like a Ronald Reagan who says, screw the polling, this is what we need to do. This is what has to happen. So we're looking for that candidate down the line.
A little more than 3 years ago, Gallup said that 70% of Americans believed in man-made global warming. Now it's 45%. One of the reasons that there's been a decline, according to the mainstream media, is because of Climategate. Could you describe what happened in Climategate? You wrote about it,
right,
and that was very influential in affecting people. And what are the implications of what happened in Climategate?
I think Climategate was big because it actually made the mainstream news cycle for a period of time. And so people got to see, wow, these brainiacs at this place called the CRU were actually lying and manipulating data. I mean, so there were people, outside of our crowd who heard the story and realized, this is not kosher, something's wrong here. So I think it lasted in the mainstream media's news cycle long enough for people outside of our group to hear it and say, okay, all right, I always suspected there was some funny stuff going on. Now I know this is incredible. So I think that was a part of it. I think another thing that has happened is when you get people giving us information that we can actually use, like so many of the bloggers in this room and so many of the books that, for example, have been written by Patrick and others, that's ammunition. That's take-home material that you can study and you can become your own little expert. So when you have that debate with the Libby in the next cubicle who believes the world's going to blow up into a flaming hot Cheeto at any moment, you can actually have a discussion with the guy. It's those types of things that have helped turn the argument around. But there's one bigger one, and that is, if you're going to have global warming, you better have some global warming. And folks, I haven't seen a lot of that for a long time. That's probably the biggest one.
Two releases of documents for Climategate now. Do you think there's more out there?
I've had that discussion with people in the know, and I tend to believe that these were leaked, not hacked. So it wouldn't surprise me whatsoever, because there is a lot of documentation that we know we haven't seen thus far. So it wouldn't surprise me. And I just think that would be it'd be a wonderful thing, quite frankly, if we could get a little bit more just to add to their misery. Yes.
Hi, this question comes from our online audience. It comes from Suzanne in Tennessee. She's asking, what do you think is the motive behind the environmentalists?
Well, thank you, Suzanne, for checking in with us. I really thought that question that I had the honor of asking the president of Czechoslovakia last night summed it up. You have all of these left-wing thinkers, let's just call them by name in the past, they were socialists and communists, who had this plan to use environmental crises to try hammer capitalism, free markets, bring about regulation, control, etc. And I told the president I asked the president of Czechoslovakia, do you think, sir, the fact that your wonderful country has been so decimated by communism in the past, that this is part of the green agenda? And he answered in the affirmative. Now, here's a guy who lived through hellish communism the bulk of his life. And as we know, I mean, one of the biggest advocates of environmentalism out there today is Mikhail Gorbachev. I mean, that's just the absolute truth. And the other thing I really find interesting, when you look at the movement, and one of Marx's great fans, students, was Vladimir Lenin. I mean, he instituted a green program in his country while he ruled for 7 or 8 years, the likes of which we hadn't seen until recently in the United States of America. But the bottom line is, Lenin believed, just like Marx wrote, that the resources belong to the state. Period. So what are we seeing here? The resources belonging to the state, and we're not able to take advantage of those wonderful resources that will be necessary for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Brian, you and I come from the same state, and which is going bankrupt pretty fast. At the same time, they're going hammer and tongs into cap and trade.
That's right.
What the hell can we do to bring a degree of sanity to Sacramento?
The answer is not another 4 years of Jerry Brown, I promise you that. No, folks, you have to realize, California, we have a $96 billion general fund budget. We're $16 billion in deficit on the annual basis. We owe the federal government $14 billion for unemployment benefits that we can't pay. We owe our general funds, transportation fund, recycling fund, all these different funds, $33 billion. I mean, we're like Greece. But we just keep chugging along like, it's going to be a brand new day. So cap and trade is coming. And they really think that this is going to be a way that they can add a couple $1 billion into their coffers every year. But at what cost? And by the way, everyone who's ever studied cap and trade, you know one of the Orwellian theories out there is that money that's paid when you exceed your cap will go to pay for the poor people's utility bills. That's exactly what they're going to do in California. They've been straight up with it. They'll take money for those who exceed the cap, and they'll pay the utility bills of those who don't have a lot of money because they know the price of energy is going to go through the roof.
Brian, I enjoyed your history of the idea of environmentalism, which traced from the 19th century through Lenin and the followers thereof. But I'm wondering if you have looked at the history of environmentalism via Germany. You know, the Volk Movement in Germany is what gave rise to the Nazi Party. And totalitarians on the right, such as Hitler, were, I think, very, very used.
No, right, left.
Well, depends. National Socialists. Well, we can have that debate. But anyway, National Socialists. The point is that environmentalism has been the refuge of totalitarians of all stripes. And I'm wondering if you've gone into that at all.
Yeah, thank you. I purposefully avoided it for the sake of this broadcast because I didn't want, the Heritage, they've got that guy up there trying to link environmentalism with Nazism. So I purposefully avoided that, but I'm familiar with what you have said. I've written about it in Eco-Tyranny and tried to put it in perspective so that we would be able to see in the context of history. You're exactly correct on that. But I purposefully avoided it for the sake of this discussion because I didn't want my comments to be taken out of context. And Joseph says, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Hi, Brian. This question also comes from our online audience. He says he's your nephew, Rob, and he asks, do you think there is an alternative energy source that would be competitive in a free market environment?
All right. Robbie, you're the man. All right. He's a college kid, and thank you very much for that great question. So one of the things I did was tried to break down the megawatt per hour subsidies, for example, for solar and wind. Now, we know what the subsidies are for oil and gas and nuclear. They're just about $1 per megawatt hour. And, you know, those subsidies generally include tax deductions. That's what it's all about. We don't give them piles of money like we do with solar and wind. So when you break down the subsidies, which include giveaways to solar and wind, their per megawatt hour subsidy is about $24 to $25 per megawatt hour. I mean, that's insanity. So I think photovoltaic solar is really cool. There's no question about that. It's almost like alchemy when you think about it. And it was, you know, Albert Einstein got a Nobel Prize for it in 1905, 1906. So I get all that. But I think it would have a better shot if we would get the government out and let the free market determine how to make this a part of our energy portfolio. But I think really, I mean, the best alternative, if we want to have electric cars, then let's have nuclear power. If we had 100% nuclear power, then we could all drive electric cars and be no problem at all because there would be a plentiful, abundant source of energy for everyone. Oh, I forgot. Wait a second. There's that environmentalist, I think his last name is Lovins, who said a cheap and abundant source of energy for the people would be like giving an idiot child a machine gun. Oh, I forgot about that. Doggone it, I forgot about that. Was it Irwin? Ehrlich? Paul Ehrlich? My Stanford neighbor? Yes, Mr. Ehrlich. Okay, thank you. You've probably written about that, haven't you?
Brian, since you want to inject humor on your radio show, you will definitely want to read the letter section of yesterday's Wall Street Journal, in which a Californian wrote a relatively lengthy letter explaining that the high-speed rail train in California was going to bail out all of the state's debt.
That's what, on my radio program, I call it Jerry Brown's choo-choo train to nowhere. This is billions of dollars, and the first stretch of track they're going to run is about 100 miles between a city I've never heard of and a city I've never heard of. And when you break down the cost per mile, I've done this, I don't have the numbers before me, but I think it's like $41 million a mile for this track. It's just outlandish. And now they're realizing, well, when we build that track between San Francisco and Los Angeles, we're going to be using the old rails, so we can't go high speed. And I'm thinking, but it's supposed to be high speed. You can't use, it's an absolute boondoggle. But they're just pushing down on this so hard, they don't want to give it up. We don't have the money. They see it as a big jobs program for a bunch of union guys. It's ludicrous. Ludicrous.
Okay, one last question over here in the corner.
Yes, Stan Goldenberg, Hurricane Research Division. You might be interested. I called Dr. Neil Frank, a fan of yours, to make sure he tuned in live to get to watch this.
Dr. Neil, you're the man. I love you, bro. You had that haircut before it was you had it when it was trendy, and now after it became trendy again. Right on, man.
Right. He loves your books.
Thank you.
Anyway, but I just wonder if you can make a comment about the whole thing with Heidi Cullen and her terrorism against TV meteorologists. You know what I'm talking about as far as taking away the seal of approval as a TV meteorologist. Thank you.
Gosh, that's again. This is another symptom of the tyranny. And if you don't comply, we'll punish you. It's just amazing. So you're going to take away my American Meteorological Society seal just because I don't comport with her view of atmospheric science. That's absolutely ridiculous. But I mean, listen, we've talked about this for the last several days. And it really, started with great thinkers like Al Gore in the mid-'90s when he was chairman of the President's Council on Sustainable Development and said it would be the policy of the United States government at that time to not debate global warming. Well, I guess she feels the same way, and I think that's just a shame. By doing that, you could actually take away the livelihood of some wonderful guys and gals out there who are skeptics, just plain and simple. Why would you want to do that? This is an important marketing tool when you go to get a job as a television meteorologist. To have the AMS seal is a really big deal. That would impact livelihoods. So it's really a shame. I've done some blogging on that. I've tried to reach out to her to get a response, but of course she never has.
Okay, that's all the time we have for tonight. Let's thank
you.
Let's thank Brian for
Thank
such
you very
a
much. Thank you.
informative,
Thank you.
inspiring, and entertaining
Thank you.
presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.
I know I feel a lot better going to sleep tonight knowing that Brian's writing books and on the air talking about these things to as many people in the public as possible. Just a little bit of housekeeping. Tomorrow morning at 8 a.m., Minister of the European Parliament, Roger Helmer, will be starting off our program. And it's 8 o'clock right here in this room. Have a good night, and we'll see you in the morning.